Then, of course, I think the next process essentially will be to condense all this in terms of an agreement, a sale agreement.
Yeah.
This sale agreement is normally drawn by the vendor's advocate, for the simple reason that the vendor is the one who's basically selling the land to you.
Yeah.
And it is also a requirement in law that all transactions in land must be in writing.
Yeah.
That is under the Contract Act. So essentially, the vendor is supposed to come up with a draft of the sale agreement. And this draft of the sale agreement has several parts. So the first part, of course, is identifying the parties. That is the vendor and the purchaser. So the agreement, in essence, will have the name of the vendor, the PO box, and then the ID. If it's a person, it will then essentially have their ID number. If it's a company, then the company registration number. Then the purchaser, of course, being yourself, essentially the same things, which is your name, ID, and addresses.
Yeah.
After that, of course, you go to the second issue, which is consideration. Consideration is basically the purchase price. Prior to, of course, entering the sale agreement, you must have negotiated with the vendor in terms of how much you're going to buy the parcel of land for, and the mode of payment. The law society conditions of sale normally give some highlight in terms of how you're supposed to frame an agreement, but parties are at liberty to, of course, either change or adopt. So you find in most transactions the sale normally has a 10% that is normally payable at the outset, and the balance, of course, on completion.
Yeah.
I'll explain what completion is. Yeah. But parties are at liberty to change that, but it's normally advisable that you follow the law society conditions of sale, because what normally happens is that if you're a purchaser and say you've put in the 10%, the other processes that are still pending, and it's the purchase might abort probably in the process, and you don't want a scenario whereby you're losing a lot of money. So it's normally advisable that you at least only part with 10%, even if you're buying, let's say,
minimum 10%.
Exactly. Then there's that part for consideration. Probably you're putting in the 10% as a purchaser. Then, of course, there's the completion documents. You normally find that the 10% is normally payable on or before execution of the agreement, on condition that the vendor is supposed to provide you with the completion documents. What I mean by completion documents is the documents that will, in essence, enable you to transfer the land to yourself, or the lawyer is able to transfer the land to now the purchaser. So the completion documents normally comprise of the original title document, transfer instrument. A transfer is now the one that basically passes ownership from the vendor to the purchaser. There is a spousal consent.
Yeah, I think we'll get that.
Yeah. Then
that is that is it's a, let me say, a new law, because it wasn't there.
Yeah. Equally, the other issues that are important in an agreement for sale are there's undertakings and warranties. These undertakings and warranties are basically given by the vendor, give you comfort in terms of the sale. There is the default clause. The default clause essentially lays the penalties, if any, that will be there both on the side of the vendor and the purchaser in the event that the same does not go through. Also, the outstanding obligations. You normally find that in some of the land transactions, there are outstanding obligations and outgoings. You normally call them outgoings, either in terms of land rent, land rates that are normally payable. It needs to provide who is supposed to pay for this also. And the applicable law that is governing this particular agreement, you may find that probably you're dealing with a foreigner, so the applicable law has to be there. And nowadays it's normally advisable to also have an arbitration clause, because sometimes easier to deal with land transaction when there's that you don't necessarily have to rush to court
Yeah.
as much as the contract provides, the agreement provides for that.
Ah.
So those are essentially the very key points that you need to have in a sale agreement.
That's new. Sorry, that is very new to me. The arbitration clause.
Yes.
I've never heard of that.
Yes, in most transactions nowadays, you find that the court process in Kenya is normally very tedious, lengthy.
Yes.
So, and you might find that parties probably are not disputing a lot of issues.
Yeah.
So you might find probably the contract provides for interest payable if there is any delay, and if you go to court, it might take a bit of some time. So what normally happens is that the arbitration clause comes in to ensure that parties negotiate and agree at a very early stage.
Early stage, yeah.
Yeah.
Which is better. All right, now we are done with the sale agreement. We have agreed on everything, and we want to proceed from there. I want to assume that we've now even deposited the minimum or whatever required amount that was there. What's after that?